It doesn't matter to me if you play tennis or if you play golf or if you swing a baseball bat or a hockey stick or whatever kind of stick you try to control accurately. It's a two-handed tool, and casting tackle is without question a two-handed tool. Now, somebody's gonna say, well, I can do this with one hand. I'm sure you can, knock yourself out. But what you lose is control and power when you do that, okay? I'm trying to teach you how to do it as easy and consistently as possible. And by doing that, I'm going to use two hands to do this. So no matter what cast I'm making, with the exception of one underhand cast, which we'll talk about here shortly, I'm going to use my left hand or my non-rod hand on the back of the rod to create a fulcrum situation. So I'm going to reel this all the way to the tip. I have a fulcrum situation right here. I don't need to have this big swinging cast because I can do this because I have a fulcrum, a lever, and then I can just do this. And I can generate all my power by pushing with my right arm and pulling with my left arm. So this is my general casting stroke, whether it's an overhand or a sidearm. My general casting stroke is the same with a casting rod or spinning rod for that matter. One hand and back, one hand up on the reel, that's gonna be your general deal, okay? Now, more specifically about the grip, I either want 2 fingers in front of this trigger or 3 fingers in front of this trigger, depending on what exactly it is that I'm doing in a lot of scenarios. And I will move back and forth over the course of a day, depending on how much control I need on the front of the rod. But in no scenario do I have 1 finger in front of this trigger. This is not a rifle, this is a fishing rod. So we want at least 2 fingers in front of this trigger all the time, and preferably 3 would be even better in a lot of scenarios because it gives me advanced control of the end of the rod that I care about. So having at least 2 fingers in front of here also places them on the blank of this rod, so you have 2 or 3 that are on the blank of the rod for feel all the time. Another key thing is I don't want to death grip the rod. You want to let the rod be as light in your hand as you can possibly let it be, because that will allow the blank to come alive. It will be sensitive, it will be responsive to any input from the other end of the line, and it'll give you a lot better feel. So in my mind, the casting rod is a two-handed tool that you don't hold on to any tighter than you have to, with 2 or 3 fingers in front, and you're always going to have good feel and good control of what your lure is doing at any given time if you keep those things in mind. Let's talk about the basic casting strokes and how we execute each one of them. And so the first one's gonna be a straight overhand cast. I'm throwing crankbaits, I'm whatever, just throwing out into open water. I don't need a lot of accuracy, I don't have a lot of wind. I'm just making overhand throws, okay? That's gonna start with something like 12 to 18 inches of line out at the tip of the rod all the time. So in this case, I'm closer to 18 inches out on the tip of the line, okay? Really important that you remember to turn the reel seat down. The reel handles have to turn down or your wrist will not work correctly. If you try to do it this way, your wrist doesn't work, okay? You need to rotate this so the handles are pointing down so that you have this motion when you grab it back here. Okay, so here we go. Mash the thumb bar, thumb is on the spool, 12 to 18 inches of line out, 2 fingers in front of the trigger. Rotate, I've got my backhand right here, I've got my handles pointed down, my backhand on the split grip right here, okay? Start with my rod pointed at my target, okay? I'm just gonna point right at my target. I'm gonna, on my back cast is where I'm gonna store my energy, and on my forecast is where I'm gonna release it. So I'm standing right here, follow through with the rod, stop the line with your thumb on the spool, and you've got a nice straight line between you and your fish. You don't have a lot of slack anywhere. Close your bail, now you're in total control. Lift my rod tip up so I can see my line, and I am in total control, okay? Now, again, if you watch, it's really important that we make all the steps the same. So 12 to 18 inches of line, thumb on the spool, thumb bar is pushed. Rotate the rod so that your wrist will work correctly. Your spools are down, your handles are down. Grab it at the split grip, point it at your target. All in one motion, close your bail, no problem, okay? That is your general cast. If I want to go farther, I just do it with more effort, but I do the same basic thing. Now I went farther with my cast, okay? Very, very easy to do that, and I basically almost doubled my casting distance. So I'm gonna do it in slow motion. Just kidding, but I'm gonna do it in slow motion. So push the thumb bar. Line is being controlled by the thumb. Rotate the handles of the reel down so that my wrist works correctly. Grabbing it right here, all in one motion. Stop the line with my thumb, close my handle. Now I am ready to fish, okay? Very, very, very important that you kind of do it the same every time for consistency. So important. Now, let's say the wind's blowing. You can see we're getting, well, not really. We're getting a little bit of wind picking up. Let's say the wind's gonna pick up. The sidearm cast will allow me to generate a lower trajectory with a lot of lure speed, but the fundamentals are the same, except for in this case, because my arm's sideways, I don't have to rotate my reel handles down. Instead of doing this, where I have to rotate my reel handles down, I'm sidearm, so I can actually leave them level right here because my wrist is already working that way because I've sidearmed it. So I can just, very simple, go through my casting stroke that way, okay? The key though is that I'm pushing with this hand and pulling with this hand. So it's all one motion. Very simple. Stop the line, either when the lure hits the water or just before, and then you can wind it in or do whatever it is your lure's calling for, okay? So the sidearm cast is an important cast because we oftentimes get wind. You can still throw it a long ways if you need to. Throw it way out there if you want, even with a sidearm cast. But that's a really important cast, okay? Because of the trajectory mostly of the lure that generates. All right, so let's say your skills are getting a little bit better with the casting rod and you need to generate a little bit more distance and you want to be very efficient. One of the things I'll advocate for that is what I call a roll cast. And if you watch, I'm gonna try to do this real slow with a lot of line out. In this case, I'm gonna be somewhere between the stripper guide and maybe the second guide up from it in terms of the sheer amount of line that's out. And it's gonna go around. And I'm just gonna use the line going around to generate my speed in that case, guys. So I'm still using two hands and I'm just following through and I'm going around in a circle with the rod tip. And what that does, if you watch the lure, we'll try to get much room as we can here. Watch the lure go around the end of the rod when I do this. And if you watch, it comes off the bottom and it goes nice and level. So my release point is right as it swings and completes its full loop. So, and I follow through with the rod tip to continue up, and that will keep the lure moving. Always the follow through, same with a bat or a golf club or a tennis racket, always the follow through. And just follow through with the rod, lift it on up, and the bait will go however far you need it to go, very, very gently, okay? That roll cast is excellent for short to mid length when I'm just in a hurry. So I made that cast, got no bite there. I'm gonna move it over 3 feet, got no bite there. Okay, well, I didn't like that cast, so now I'm gonna go a little bit more to the left, and I can just be very quick and very efficient at making these short 20 to 30 foot casts, okay? It's not as accurate as pitching, which I'll show you right now, but it's extremely quick and extremely efficient, and it's one of the things that makes casting tackle very efficient for fishing visible cover. So the whole deal with pitching, guys, is that you've got to be able to get the rod, the butt of the rod, inside of your humerus bone. So if this is too long, you're gonna have a hard time with that. So you gotta choose a rod that's got a short enough handle. Most all of the rods these days, they understand that. And you gotta have a nice short handle. So you're gonna have that. It's still gonna be reel handles down, same as the overhand cast, reel handles down. Now I've got all this line to the stripper guide or maybe even more line out, okay? I'm gonna drop the rod, you can see right here, and I'm gonna just drop the lure and accelerate through with the rod when I do it. I'm not loading the rod, I'm just gonna drop it and accelerate through and let the bait go. By doing that, the bait's gonna stay really close to the water. Watch, I'll do it again. The bait just goes very gently into the water and it's extremely accurate. Okay, every time. If you pick a little stick up, that one tall stick up down there, you think, oh, that's where the bass is. So I'm gonna throw it in there right next to that little stick up and hopefully get that bass, okay? The deal with the pitch cast, guys, the underhand like this, is it's very quiet, it's very efficient. Your lure sneaks into the water real quietly, so you can just, you know, at close range, if I was just working down this bank right here, I could just do it very quickly and really efficiently with this little underhand little flip move. But I'm not putting any load in the rod. The rod is basically just a big giant lever for me at this point to swing the bait with. It's not really loading the tip of the rod. This rod's extremely heavy. So it's not loading the tip of the rod, but as soon as that bait hits the water, I close the bail, I'm in total control. If I need the bait to sink, let's say I'm pitching into 5 feet of water, I can just feed it a little bit of line. You'll see guys do that and just feed it a little bit of line and let it down, and then they'll close their bail. Really, really important though that this cast, because this is the one you need to master. That's the one that's gonna catch you the most fish with a spinning, or with a casting rod, I should say, is because it's accurate. Point the rod up, rod tip always lands high for me. It doesn't land here. We don't do this. We don't do this with the rod and end here, because now my bait's got no room to sink. It's gonna sink to me. I'm also out of position to feel what's going on with the bait or anything else. So what happens is you follow through with the rod and the rod's up. So then when I close the bail and control my slack, my rod is in position ready to set the hook no matter what happens. And that's a really important thing. The other thing that's important about a pitch cast, this little cast, guys, is what if I got trees and I'm on the bank? Maybe I don't have a boat and I'm on the bank and I got all kinds of stuff behind me. The rod never goes behind me. Everything's in front of me. So I can have a giant willow tree right here and it's not a problem. I can have a power line right there, it's not a problem. I can be under a bridge in my boat and it's not a problem because I still have plenty of range. And if the camera looks down the bank, we'll make a long pitch just to show you can. That's a pretty long ways to pitch a bait, guys. That's gotta be 60, 70 feet away that I pitched it, okay? I'll do another one. You can watch, and the reason that's important is, again, is if you might be on the bank or because it's accurate, piece of cake. That's at least a 50 or 60 foot pitch. And by being able to do that, look how low my bait was to the water the whole way there. No problem, and that's a 1/2 ounce lure that I'm throwing. So that's a really important cast if you have anything behind you or whatever. Maybe you're on the bank of a stream even with a spinning rod if you're watching this show. Same thing, that underhand cast like that's really, really important, and it's all about the follow through with the rod tip and the fact that the lure stays low to the water all the time. It's nice and quiet and it's very, very efficient.